presentation is being put up. Good afternoon. We've heard of tombstones in an earlier presentation. I'm fortunate to be given the graveyard shift. You can see many seats empty, many eyes closing, people falling asleep, but I hope I'm able to get you to concentrate at this late stage. Thank you very much to Sarah for the invitation to present to you on what we regard as a life and death matter. So whether it is in this industry of live events, technical production, whether it's in your home, whether it's in another industry, issues of safety, security, health is about life and death. And we hope that through our engagement here, that we can infuse the issue of safety into the culture in your sector. It must be part of the culture of the sector. So when you look at things, you don't separate the issues of technical production from the issues of safety. You don't separate the issues of safety, health and security, etc. from the event and chasing after time and producing an event within a specific time. So I would apologize in the beginning for the absence of Mr. Malifi. He had to catch a flight. In this industry, I think you know, there's a very popular football team in Africa. They're based here. Who's going to play on Saturday at Moses Mabhida? But they're not performing well. So at least, Malifi's gone on our behalf to attend to the issues of safety and security, both at the activation today, as well as for the game on Saturday. So he had to fly. And so apologies from his side, because he was going to share, we as a team, we share our expertise and our experiences in everything we do. We've had a long track record of major events, attending to issues of safety and security. If you look at the program and the profile, you may not understand who we really are. It gives you a little bit about the business side, but just to tell you very briefly that both of us have been involved in major events, particularly in sport events, for a long time now, over 20 years. Myself, I've come through all the way from being an athlete, coach, and administrator, professor, to university teaching, event management. I'm a researcher as well, a rated NRF researcher. So I bring my skills, my knowledge, and so forth by being out in the field and not just as an academic. So I'm not attached to any university, and I'm not here to represent government either. So as an independent consultant, we thought we can make a difference in terms of what you do, because we are at events. We are at music events, festivals. We handle the safety and security. And we are here to share with you what are the challenges. Okay, what do you see? So we're going to share firstly a few pictures from our observation and experiences. Okay, here's a group of guys, team ready to set up for an event. And just by looking carefully, you would see what's typical is some guys will be prepared, and others, where you are short of human resources, you pick up from the street. And so, some would not even be appropriately attired. People working on temporary structures, you can see straight away the issue of attire and preparedness for a very technical job. Something that requires a qualification, experience, technical competence. Here too, Mulifi tells me I wasn't here, but he tells me he had to stop what was going on here because these guys were constructive. But if you can see, that's a team. And look in terms of attire. So as safety officer, he just had to stop them right there. This is how they lay out their stuff, if you could call it laid out, in order to construct. Here, a very nice one. A high structure, but they've got no harnesses. I've really, I wish I could enlarge this picture to show you the detail, but the guys are on a very high structure that's more than 20 meters high, but they've got no harness. And so please don't think that we are just picking the difficult things and leaving the nice things about the industry. Okay, this is what we see on an ongoing basis. This is what we encounter all the time. The same structure is there. If you can see it, it's not a very good picture because of the background, but the structure is there. And it shows that those guys are there without any harnesses, over 20 meters up. The kind of aftermath, there was a death, there's a body lying there at a music festival. And from an environmental point of view, you can see the non-sensitivity to issues of environment. The litter tells you a story. Yes, this is there to show you there's another side to the industry when we deal with safety and security, that you do have deaths taking place, you have criminal elements and crimes being committed. So when we talk of safety, just let it spark of the different elements that we speak about. Here, the safety officer wasn't even present at the event. That's a huge crowd at a jazz festival. In our country, all of these pictures are in our country. Please don't think they are from elsewhere. It's what you and I do regularly at events. Okay? So, Mulifi had to coordinate aspects of safety here. And it was an event where also there were deaths, there were many people injured, a lack of control, police not knowing what their responsibilities were. And you had this kind of injuries at this event. Okay, just to show you ambulances, access to emergency care. Here's what you were talking about in terms of your side setting up for production. But what we had to stop at this event is the issue of, if you look at the ground, the cabling. There's no ways we as safety officers are going to permit this to proceed even one step further. Unless the cable, there's a trench and it's placed below the ground level in the correct tubing. And there are standards for this. Electricians know their business. They know their standards. They're qualified in their field. But we are safety officers and we look at the overall standards and have to make sure that we coordinate everything. Alright, so that was just to get us started and thinking. By way of introduction, I say that large events, and when we talk events, let's think broadly. They are always in the news, but very often it's for the wrong reasons, and they have a negative impact on society. So instead of patrons experiencing fun at our events, they end up experiencing trauma and stress. In sport, 2001, the Ellis Park disaster on the 11th of April of that year. You know that 43 people died. And because of this, it's sad that we are a reactive nation. Our government was even reactive. There was no specific legislation up to that time for the eventing industry. Because that's an event. That sparked off the legislation and the legislative framework that I'm going to speak about and take you through. Then, you know, in 2001, sorry, not 2003, there was a stage collapse at Women's Day celebrations, nationally in Pretoria. At that time, President Thabo Mbeki was on the stage. You could recall this event. It was in the news because it was a big event. I mean, the president. So, how about last year? The Global Citizens Show at Soccer City. A rigger died, fell to his death. After the event, you've heard about it in social media, you've heard it on mainstream media, on the news. All the criminal elements that were not taken care of from a safety and security point of view. So the planning to manage post-event in the vicinity, in the precinct, was a problem. So daily, now please, I can't put it in simpler English, every day, as a result of occupational accidents or work-related diseases, more than 2.78 million deaths occur per annum. That's a lot of people who died, unfortunately, for the wrong reasons. That's global, yes. It's a global figure. It's a global figure. So 85 to 90% of all accidents can be attributed to at-risk behavior. In other words, when people take a chance. They're at risk, but they're prepared to go ahead taking the risk. And that is where you find most of the serious accidents occurring. So this problem then continues. There's chaos, there's confusion, people don't know what they're supposed to do. In some cases they do know what they're supposed to, but they don't do it anyhow, and there is no control. And this we regard as totally unnecessary. We're in the entertainment industry. How entertaining is it when you come across this kind of news and those kinds of pictures? Carl said, you know, you've got to be in the moment. You've got to enjoy what you're doing. You must have passion for what you're doing. I can't see how people with a passion would let these things happen. So the other thing is, from our observation, particularly in this industry, you work like this, in silos. There's L, there's E, there's T, there's P. And then we come together for a conference and we will go back and we will be in L, E, and T. We are one country, we are one nation. When you have an event, we want to experience it as a whole. So therefore, when we plan, and we execute, we implement the plan, and we revise those things, let's work together as a team. Let's do everything as a team so that no small element is neglected. Because that little element that's neglected is the one that causes the biggest problems. Alright, so I'm going to speak about the South African Sport and Recreation Act of 2010 and tell you why it is also governing this industry, because it's not about sport only, it's sport and recreation. And in the context of recreation, all your spectators are there for leisure, for their entertainment, like they would go to a sport event. So whether they come to a live music event, cultural event, it's the same regulation, so the same framework is there to guide you. And it's applicable to all provincial departments of sport, recreation, arts, culture, to municipal governments, and very important, all owners or organizers of events, you're governed by this Act. So sport, recreation, arts, culture events have to avoid unlawful conduct and diseases and disasters and all the problems that go with it. And I say all relevant role players have to work as a team. I've made that point already. And quite often, this is the excuse we get, that advanced preparation takes time. And in business, time is money. So you try to cut corners. You try to do things late. Firstly, I don't understand why you should be doing it late. If somebody is not doing their work, now you're trying to cover up for them. You're doing it in the last minute. That's most of the problems when people are in a hurry. They do not satisfy their legal responsibilities. In other words, the minimum that's required of them, they don't satisfy it because they cut corners. So this Act, what does it provide for? It provides for measures to safeguard the physical well-being and safety of persons and the property of people at sports or recreational events held at different kinds of venues. And it also deals with certain prohibitions, in other words, what's not allowed or who's not allowed there. It also talks about the risk categorization of events, into the different risk categories, high risk, medium risk, and low risk. Where does your event sit? So it provides for those. It also talks about the establishment of measures to deal with safety and security at events. What measures must be taken in order to ensure safety and security at the event? And then it also deals with the appointment of a security officer. This is a critical one for us, and it really is about somebody being there to coordinate all the different elements. You've got ambulances, and you've got traffic police, and then you've got SAPs, and then you've got the technical production people, and you've got the eventing people, and then the facility owner and their staff, and then you've got security, and then in many of our events, you have volunteers. Nice people who are working free of charge for you, giving you their passion. But quite often, there's no leadership. There's no control over these volunteers. They're not shown precisely what they have to do. So, it deals with the accreditation of role players at events. It speaks about event ticketing and what's allowed and what's not allowed. It speaks about the control of access of spectators as well as vehicles to the event. And very often at big events, when the route for the emergency vehicles is not laid out and not marked out, and you do have a disaster, then the emergency vehicles can't get in, and those that are in can't get out. And people die. Because when people are injured seriously, it's a question of time, how quickly they can get medical help. So it doesn't help where the emergency vehicles don't have access, either to come in or to go out. Then the issuing of safety certificates for planned or existing stadia or venues. Quite often your events are at ready-made existing venues. But sometimes you're at a space. It's not a venue, it's a space. And you create a venue out of it. So the certification is important. And then it deals with the contents of safety certificates and amendments on safety certificates. It tells you what content, what information is on a safety certificate, and if it is amended, what do you need to have as proof. Then it deals with the appointment of inspectors and their powers of entry and inspection, and to provide for the deployment of security services. So all these are regulated. It's there in the Act. It talks about advertising boards. Today, you know, advertising boards are massive structures at venues. These need certification. There are spectator exclusion notices. It tells you if you want to exclude certain types of spectators or certain spectators or at certain times. It tells you how to do it. It also deals with the establishment of an appeals board for appeals, because what happens if you apply to the Commissioner of Police, or you apply to the city engineer for a certain certificate and it is not granted? So there's an appeals process, there's an appeals board. Public liability insurance for events. We will talk more about insurance, but I think you know what public liability is in terms of events. We'll talk a little more later. The issue of payment of fees comes in. And then offences and sanctions, I will talk about it a little later. But they are serious offences and they are serious penalties. They are spelled out in this Act. So, what we find in our experience is that the key terms in the legislation, in the industry, is not understood. People working in the industry, in sport, recreation, the arts, culture, political events as well, they do not understand what do we mean by a controlling body. In this legislation it talks about the controlling body, a body that has governance over, let's say here now, the events, the technical production, etc. What body do you belong to that has governance over you? Okay. What is their responsibility? People don't understand what we mean by disaster management. Yet in our country we have a Disaster Management Act, specifically on the prevention of disasters. Or, when a disaster does occur, what steps to take and how to manage. What are emergency services? What is a stadium? What is a venue? Who are stewards? Who are marshals? Who are ushers? They're not one and the same. Each has a specific role to play. And quite often the people in our industry don't understand what those specific roles are. So how do we deploy them to do this? When we ourselves don't know what they are supposed to do. Okay, so the scope of the Act, it describes who this Act applies to and who may be exempted. And this quite often is also not understood. So the only people that can be exempted from this Act, there's two categories of people. One, if you apply to the minister to be exempted. In other words, at a very high political level, if you apply and they grant you in writing, in good time, written permission not to comply with this law, for whatever reason, you are then exempted. The other exemption is, in the Gatherings Act of 2001, in the Gatherings Act, certain political events and certain private events would be excluded from this. You know, if you're having your wedding in a private venue, the public, it's not a public interest, okay? So certain political events that are in the Gatherings Act would be exempted from this. But otherwise, the large majority of events that you and I are concerned with have to comply with this Act. So, the next thing is, one was terminology. Now we say processes. How and when to do certain things is also not understood by the industry. I'll take you through some of them. The minimum legal requirements and obligations for the role players in safety and security at an event. For example, at local dances, funerals, weddings, church functions, music or jazz festivals, exhibitions, conferences, banquets, meetings, rallies, marches, etc. To be hosted at a stadium, hall or other venue. What are they? Do we really know? Our experience is many people in the events industry do not know. Who are the key role players that are involved with an event? If you ask, they don't get everybody together. So Event Safety and Security Planning Committee. What is this? What is a planning committee? Who establishes it? And who makes it up? How many people in there? All of this is in the Act, but in our industry, in the events industry, we find that people don't know this. It's basic. And then we find also that under budgeting by event organizers for public safety and security at events is viewed by some as an unnecessary expense because it limits their profit. So they pay the least attention to safety and security because it is shrinking the budget. They are prepared to compromise the lives of how many thousands of them you know for your events. Okay? So, just so that the profit margins are okay, comfortable and cozy. When I train people, sorry, I'm just deviating a little bit, but it's an important principle that I use. When I train people to manage risk, I say to them, will you send your 10-year-old child, male or female, to this event alone? If the answer is yes, it means you would have done some due diligence for that event. You would have checked what, you know what your interest is for the safety of your child. And if you're not really happy, you will not send your child. So, again, to come back to Carl's, put yourself, your whole self, your whole life into that situation. Think of yourself being in that situation. Would you be able to, or would you be prepared to face an event where the risks have not been eliminated? Basic things have not been complied with because somebody is trying to cut corners to make a bigger profit. Okay, insurance. What types of insurance are compulsory for your event? It depends on the nature of the event and where your event is, but every event requires certain types of insurance to be taken. In the least, the public liability insurance. How to prepare a written safety plan. Many people, if asked them to write a safety plan, they don't get it right. So the Act tells you what is to be put into a safety plan. Create a template for yourself because you're going to use this in your industry repeatedly. Create checklists to see that you have not forgotten X, Y, and Z. Yesterday ended the South African Institute for Occupational Safety and Health conference at Gallagher, and we were represented there. It is sad to see that the same issues crop up there with people from different industries, whether they're from mining, etc., look at the issues of occupational safety. And the issue of safety planning, the planning of risks and writing down the plan is where a large problem exists. So if you use a checklist approach, it's so easy to eliminate the risks. And where you do notice a risk, you find a way to mitigate it. And the example given was from the United States, which we think is always very smart in terms of safety and security, where, and this is military now, where it's even higher than civilians flying. For a practice exercise on a helicopter where they had to fly out with a parachute, one fairly highly ranked individual in their military was prepared to jump until his supervisor said, hold on, and he checked. He had everything, but his clips were not on. So he would have jumped out of the plane and fallen like a rock. So it can happen anywhere, in any industry, in any country. Your safety plan, your checklist, and responsibilities of supervisors to check and recheck and recheck. Things like who is responsible for waste management, who is responsible for the utilities, electricity, water, all of this is in the Act. What acts of behavior will constitute an offence in terms of this Act, or the Occupational Health and Safety Act? All of these are there. Okay? So, I don't want you to think that because our experiences from the sports sector that I'm just focusing on legislation which relates or comes from a sport background. Remember I said that we are one nation, we have one government, so forget about these different departments. The legislation regarding events comes from various sectors, and therefore it would sit in different departments. So you have a Department of Health, there would be health regulations. They have legislation and there would be regulations. There's sport and recreation and arts and culture and so forth. There would be trade and industry like you spoke about. Okay? So, in the end, as event organizers, we've got to understand that the legislative framework is there. It is not specific to our industry. It's for anybody organizing events. So, municipalities have a responsibility. I will go through this very quickly because we have limited time. But in short, when you have an event, you've got to apply to the municipality because in most cases, your facilities are owned by the municipality. So you've got to apply to the city engineer for your, firstly, your venue. Your venue certificate has to come from there. The safety of the venue. Okay? So whether it's an existing venue or a new venue or a venue that's upgraded, okay, and modified for an event, you have to have in your possession the safety certificates. And inspectors will ask to see that you have to have it on your file. But what happens is, if you look at the last 2 points, I say there's no capacity locally to coordinate safety and security in health matters. And no skills transfer takes place from external service providers from other provinces. Our experience is, if you have an event in Mpumalanga or in Limpopo or in Northwest as an example, then you'll find Gauteng, the whole of Gauteng being exported from here, imported there, you go do the event and you come back, and the next event it's repeated. But the locals have not developed these skills. There's no skills development, no transfer of skills. We've got to think about this and how we handle this. Okay. The National Commissioner of Police, those are things that are in the Act, okay? But essentially, the Commissioner of Police has to take your event when you apply to the Commissioner and grade it. High risk, medium risk, low risk. Very few events are high risk. These are largely mega events of an international nature, okay? There are national events which are huge, get categorized as medium risk, and then you get your low risk events. So what is important is that when you apply to the Commissioner of Police, that's at provincial level, that you also liaise with your local station commander, because you don't rely on the provincial commissioner communicating everything to the local commander, because you know your business and your game better. So also liaise with the local station commander, all the necessities, etc. And in any case, they sit on your planning committee. It's important to have the police. There are different things that are prohibited at events, and I think you know it, but one that always strikes me is, if you look at the picture, they show flares, incendiaries, fireworks. You know, as entertainers, we like to play with fireworks at our events, and it show business, eh? Yes, but you know, all of those have their own risks. So you need a certificate if you're going to use these elements in your production. You can't just have them there and not be certified. They've got to be operated by a certified person. Okay, let me just go ahead. I'm going to skip past that provisional risk categorization. Okay, then there's inspectors, and you know the inspectors will come from the local authority. All right, so they are coming there to ensure that the event is according to the plan that they've received, according to the application. They're going to ask to see proof. They're going to walk around and talk to you and also see things in action, live. Your event is live. So they're going to come before they can come during the event as well. And you've got to give them permission to inspect. Accountability, this one is important. Any failure by controlling bodies, the stadium, the venue operators, the event organizers, or any other public safety officials, it says you are liable to the following criminal consequences if you violate this legislation. You can have criminal penalties for 5 to 20 years imprisonment, or the equivalent fine, which is substantial, or both, imprisonment and the fine. So, I would say, friends and colleagues, this is not to shock you. It's not about shock tactics. No, it's to show you that our business is serious. There is a regulation. There is a framework. Let us begin to understand what the framework is. Let's engage with it. Let us begin to implement it in its entirety. Let's do things right. Sometimes we say we are doing the right things. But I'm saying, while you do the right things, also do things right. It's your attitude that counts. Okay, very quickly, food safety and quality. I will just touch on this. A presentation will be given to you. You know, there are Department of Health. There's a whole lot of regulations, and the regulations have amendments upon amendments, food quality changes, etc. But what is our experience is that, oh, sorry, this thing's jumped. Okay, yes, that providing food to your consumers, I'm going to say consumers, but you know who's at your event, is a health issue. And so often you find issues of food poisoning or other dangerous acts by the service providers that you procure. They don't have the necessary expertise, they don't have the correct equipment, they don't have the transportation, they don't have the refrigeration capacity for the volumes of food. And so, what you are getting very often is not value for money. You're getting disease for your money. It's been our experience, we know about it. So, it's something that is in your hands. You can control this. Okay, but there's legislation and things that we have to abide by. From an Occupational Health and Safety Act point of view, quite often in the industry that we are in, you know, because it's about entertainment, it's about a nice feeling, it's like sport too, it's entertaining. People don't see this as business. And I'm glad the panel before spoke about the business side and their challenges. But what is important here is you've got to regard your business as the workplace. Now, the workplace is not office-based in the events industry. Yes, you may have an office and reception is there, but the live work is at the event, at the site. So that is also the workplace where you've got to ensure that there's a safe working environment. Okay? A safe working environment. And there's many things that are required here. What is important is, if you look at the second last bullet here, achieving a safe and healthy workplace, whether on-site at the event or not, is a legal responsibility for the employer and the employee. So don't think the boss only is responsible for safety. Every level of worker on-site is legally responsible for safety and security. And firstly, and their own health. Because it's no point in having all these high-level laws, okay, and then you go and eat contaminated food. The law is not going to protect you in that case. Do you understand? So very often I say to people, the issue of safety, health, and security is a simple one. It's a question of common sense. But when I see so many incidents and so many accidents, then I realize common sense is not so common these days. Okay, I'm going to skip there. Here's things that, on the job safety, you've got to ensure that these different areas are taken care of. Equipment training. So guys cannot just come and construct any temporary structure without training, because it requires time and knowledge. Protective clothing. Fall hazards, slip and trip hazards, manual handling of objects and heavy weights and boxes and equipment, etc. So people have to be trained in terms of how to manually handle. I find many people at home and at work and so forth complaining of low back pain. The problem is they haven't learned to bend their knees when they pick up objects. Simple. They lift with their backs, but God's given us knees. Go down, pick it up, come up with our knees. Just keep your back straight. Okay, so there's things like noise protection, workplace violence, fire precautions, hazardous substances, and then, very important, sexual harassment. Many people shy away from this topic as if it doesn't happen, and where they do get to know about it, it's swept under the carpet, because who wants to hit the media about this issue? So you've got to ensure that you have policies, you have processes and procedures in place that you also eliminate this kind of unwanted conduct. And I say here, SARA should develop a toolkit to encourage compliance with the Occupational Health and Safety Act among SMEs and small service providers. There should be a toolkit with regards to the whole issue of safety and security and health, etc. Because, like it came through from the panel, you're going to compromise the area of safety and security. The guys are going to employ local labor. So how do you get them trained? What is it that they must do? If you don't have a toolkit to start off with, you're not going to get it right. Okay, so I'm going to skip this on the committee and so forth. Medical and other emergencies, I think you must plan for it. In your safety plan, you've got to allow for medical and other emergencies. There's not only medical emergencies, there could be other emergencies as well. Insurance and indemnities. I think what's important is, because you have various role players involved in your event, you have different service providers. The principle is that while you have an overall event owner, somebody owns this event, okay? But each service provider carries their own insurance and their own liability for their specialized service. But it is important that the event owner checks this. Because in the law and in the insurance business, you know, they're not happy to throw money at you. So they will do anything not to pay. And so the principle is that you are jointly and severally liable. Meaning, not just that person who caused the problem is going to be liable. the entire establishment, because you are jointly, all of you together at the event, responsible for safety. Okay? And then individually, you are also responsible. So on the individual count, some service provider may escape this because we have nothing to do with that, but jointly, you are responsible. So consider the different types of insurance. Read the fine print because it's a legal document, and know what you want to cover. And be specific because insurance policies are very specific. Okay? I wish I had more time to talk to you about this, but it's, if I tell you something, in sport we say, you know about the $1 million golf challenge? You don't need to know about golf, but there is such an event. And these days it's not 1 million because 1 million is nothing to those guys. Okay, the prize money has gone up substantially. I don't know how many million it's worth. The prize. So, imagine if that prize is not insured. Because when the guy wins the tournament, he wants his money. And you better have that money. So even the prize, there is such a thing as prize insurance. So it's a very specialized field. There's a lot to inform you about in terms of insurances. Unfortunately, we don't have the time to get into too many details here. Then also I said to you, we are one country, we are one nation. We must make sure that we get to read. We understand the different legislation that also impacts on us. For example, you get COIDA, Compensation for Occupational Injuries and Diseases Act of 1993. You know what you call workman's compensation. When you're injured on duty, IOD, it's all there. You're working, you're injured on duty. Environmental Conservation Act, I spoke about environment, in whichever field we are, we've got to be sensitive to the environment. Smoking Act, at your venue, in the transport that you use, etc., you've got to comply with the Smoking Act. Environmental Management Act, and then the Disaster Management Act for disasters.
Are there any questions for Professor?
Yeah.
Thank you. Mics 1, 2, 3. Now, Janet.
Thank you very much. So that was a great presentation. Mine is really a concern. I mean, like, you just triggered this concern in me. Like 2 years ago, we did an event. It was a presidential event. It was a campaign rally, actually, for our President Uhuru and the Vice President Ruto. A lot of people, thousands of people. And again, it was a last-minute kind of an event, whereby they just wake up one morning and be like, "Oh, come, we want you to set up for us." It's like, all right, that's fine. Big stage, the roof and trusses and everything. We had fences and, of course, crash barriers, making sure that we barricaded everything and had a good perimeter. I mean, being a presidential event, of course, security was really tight. Until at one point, and you, of course, they get carried away, they're talking and fans are cheering and they're like, okay, now everybody can just come in front. And then you've got all these thousands of people who just stormed in and then shaking the stage. And then, now the next thing is, you've got these people who are like, what is wrong with your stage? It's like, well, the stage has been, farmed the whole time. It has been reinforced. But, there were like 50 people sitting over there, and now you've just brought in 1,000 of people that are shaking the stage. And now I'm thinking, I was like, what if anything happened? Whose responsibility was it?
Thank you. It's a simple one. It's a hard one to manage, but it's a simple one in terms of crowd control. Your safety and security plan, it starts there. very clearly must deal with how many people you expected at the event. You understand? How many people you're giving access to, because you control the access to them. So you don't just let it build up and build up and build up. But more importantly, as to how you're going to seat, if they're going to be seated or how they're going to stand or dance or whatever it is. You understand? So the crowd control has to be addressed already in the plan. And as the event organizer, you're responsible for it. That you had to take control measures with regards to the prevention of your crowd just moving in any direction, because a crowd crush, that is what you're describing. It has happened on numerous occasions at Ellis Park. That was the crush, where people from outside pushed their way in. Okay? So, Hillsborough disaster in European football. Premiership. That's where it started. So it is your responsibility to ensure that you have the appropriate security personnel, that you have the appropriate security devices and measures in place to prevent any such uncalled for movement.
I totally understand. These are, these are people that, like make orders, right? Let's not forget that this was a presidential thing, okay? And then on top of that, like security was like beyond our control. This is like the government security. It is those people, on that powerful seat telling them come. Who are you to stop them?
You see, fortunately, Molefi and I handled the presidential in Bizo in, I think, 1990. No, 2008 to 2007 in Soweto. 10,000 people seated around the president and his men and women on the stage. That is the responsibility, without a doubt, of the event management, the event organizer. If you are placed there, and that's your responsibility, and that's what you've been paid for, then you've got to ensure that, regardless of the fact that it is the president of the country, his staff that are ignoring the basic things that are in your plan, you've got to enforce it. Because in the end, the courts are not going to say, ask the questions of the president. They're going to ask it of you. Because it was your paid job. So it comes down to that. And I'll give you an example. If it's the president, there's issues of, for example, a helicopter is going to land. It must land where you've dedicated the spot and it's marked and agreed upon. They've inspected the site before. It can't there now suddenly, when your 10,000 people are there, say, no, we're going to land there. It can't change. You have to exert your authority. You're in a position of authority. You've been appointed. The commissioner has appointed you as a safety officer, as an example. The commissioner of police, and their safety and security is in the hands of the police, not the president and not his bodyguards, for sure.
I want to ask, from what he said, I went to a rally, and then what happened was the president of the rally, he called a few people to come on stage, and once he touched the people's hands and shaking hands, everyone at the stadium, they were at the EFF stadium, and then everyone, another stadium, and everyone got on the stage and they started even messing with the fencing. So does this still become the problem of the events planner, or it becomes the problem of the president, because he's the one who said they should come on stage?
Please understand this. Please understand this. When you have politicians, they are not event people. They are not safety and security inclined. They will do anything. And I'll give you a similar example. I don't know if you go to live cricket events or watch it on television, But cricket events are always sold out, you know, depending on the size of the venue, 50,000, 60,000, 70,000 people there. And then they come up with this stupid, absolutely stupid rule that you can win. You will be put into a draw for R1 million if when a batsman hits a six, you know, six, they hit a high ball and without it touching the boundaries of the play field, it lands outside. So usually outside means anywhere in the crowd, and some do make it outside the crowd too, but usually sixes. So that ball has R1 million written on it, and you are seated. Are you going to remain seated? The guy in front is putting his hand or her hand there, and the ball is going to land there if you let it. Will you? So as event organizers, we've got to be smart enough to eliminate that kind of conduct. But it means in the planning, in the briefing sessions that we have with our stakeholders, we've got to clarify roles and responsibilities, what's allowed, what's not allowed, because it's a recipe for disaster. It is. That's why I say it's just like outsurance. The guy comes with a motorbike, parks it off there, helmet off, and then they're controlling traffic. Hey, you can't then allow taxis just to hit past when your hand is there. You're an authority. Stop means stop. So if I can't stop the guy, I shouldn't be there. I must get out. Let somebody else do the job.